The officer shouts an order. The soldiers stand in formation, and then one of them drops his rifle. He's laughing. Not nervous laughter, uncontrollable, hysterical laughter, like he just heard the funniest joke of his life. His knees give out, and he falls into the mud, giggling like a child. Another soldier takes a step forward, then another, then wanders off the field entirely, walking toward the trees as if he's discovering a new planet. His eyes are glassy, unfocused. He can't hear his commander at all. A third soldier stands perfectly still. He stares at his own hands, confused, trembling, like he's seeing skin for the first time. Then suddenly, he screams. A loud, primal scream that echoes across the training ground. The officer looks around, shocked. The entire unit he was supposed to lead is falling apart. Disoriented, confused, laughing, terrified, wandering. Not a single man can hold a rifle. Not a single man can follow a command. Not a single man is combat capable. And this is not the enemy's doing. This is a U.S. military test. And the thing ripping these soldiers apart isn't a bomb, bullet, or chemical weapon. It's LSD. Welcome to one of the strangest, darkest, and most reckless scientific pursuits in military history. The dream of psychedelic warfare. Flashback. How it all started to understand how the U.S. Army, the CIA, and even the British military ended up dosing their own soldiers with powerful hallucinogens. We need to rewind to the late 1940s. The world had changed forever. The horrors of World War II left governments with a grim realization. Technology had evolved. Warfare had evolved. And the next battlefield might be the human mind. As the Cold War began, the US and the Soviet Union weren't just racing to build bigger bombs. They were racing to understand and control psychological weakness. Fear drove everything. Americans feared communist brainwashing. The Soviets feared American intelligence advances. Each side believed the other might unlock the ability to interrogate prisoners with a single chemical or create soldiers who never broke under torture. So when news came from Switzerland that a chemist named Albert Hofmann had discovered a bizarre new compound, one that could bend perception, distort time, and alter thoughts using a dose smaller than a grain of salt, the military took notice. This compound was LSD, lysergic acid diethylamide. The question became irresistible. Could LSD turn into the perfect psychological weapon? Could it break enemy soldiers? Could it force prisoners to confess? Could it disorganize enemy units without firing a shot? Could it create super-resistant spies? Could it help interrogators bypass the strongest willpower? The U.S. military and CIA didn't know the answers, but they were determined to find out, and so began one of the most unethical scientific adventures in modern history. The experiments begin Phase 1, the first soldier tests, U.S. Army and British Porton Down. The earliest military LSD trials occurred in the mid-1950s. In the U.S., they took place at the Army's Chemical Research Center at Edgewood Arsenal, Maryland. In the UK, they happened at Porton Down, the military's biological and chemical warfare facility. Real footage, later declassified, shows exactly what happened during these early tests. The setup was deceptively simple. A group of soldiers was brought into a field for a normal training exercise. They were told they were being given a substance to test battlefield performance under stress. Then each soldier swallowed a small, clear liquid. At first, nothing seemed wrong. But slowly, the drug took hold. The deterioration was shocking. Soldiers dropped rifles as if they weighed 500 pounds. Some became confused and forgot the exercise entirely. Others stared at objects for minutes, fascinated. A few walked away from the group. Some laughed uncontrollably. One sat down and refused to move, claiming his thoughts were too interesting to interrupt. Officers tried to give commands, but the unit, once disciplined, could no longer obey. In one British test, the entire squad, high on LSD, began debating deeply philosophical ideas in the middle of a combat drill. The officer in charge eventually gave up. The results were clear. On LSD, a trained soldier was completely useless. And that gave military planners an idea. If LSD could disable their own troops this effectively, what could it do to the enemy? Phase 2. Intelligence agencies. Join the game, MK Ultra. The U.S. Army was interested in battlefield effects, but the CIA had a different dream. They wanted to know, could LSD force someone to tell the truth? Could it erase memory? Could it reprogram behavior? This led to the now infamous MK Ultra program, a massive network of sub-projects run from 1953-1973. Unlike the controlled soldier trials, some MK Ultra experiments were deeply unethical. People were dosed without their knowledge. Psychiatric patients were given LSD repeatedly. Prisoners were offered reduced sentences in exchange for participation. CIA safe houses were used to secretly drug civilians through Operation Midnight Climax. The idea was to break resistance, weaken defenses, and create subjects who were more vulnerable to interrogation. But LSD didn't behave like a truth serum. Some people became chatty, others became terrified, some fell into silence, and some developed long-term trauma. The perfect confession-inducing drug didn't exist, but intelligence agencies were not ready to give up. They escalated further. Phase 3. The Edgewood Arsenal Human Experiments, 1955-1975. This was the largest military psychedelic testing program in U.S. history. More than 7,000 soldiers participated over 2 decades. Many believed they were testing protective gear or antidotes. Few were told they were taking psychedelics. At Edgewood, LSD, BZ, a delirium-inducing compound, mescaline, amphetamines, other experimental agents, were administered under controlled but ethically questionable conditions. Documented effects included disorientation, panic, memory disruptions, visual and auditory hallucinations, emotional breakdowns, inability to perform simple tasks, long-term psychological disturbances in some subjects. The tests produced data, but at a cost. Soldiers later testified they were not fully informed and did not understand the risks. Some struggled with anxiety, depression, or PTSD for years afterward. And for what? The military still hadn't found its miracle drug. While many tests were controlled and monitored, several real-world incidents revealed how dangerous these experiments could be. Here are the most disturbing true twists. No fiction, no exaggeration. One of the darkest incidents occurred in 1953. Frank Olson, a government scientist, attended a CIA retreat. There, he was secretly given LSD without consent as part of a test. Over the following days, Olson suffered intense anxiety, paranoia, disorientation, emotional collapse. 9 days later, he plunged from a 13th floor hotel window to his death. The CIA called it a suicide. Decades later, investigations revealed he had been unknowingly drugged and deteriorated rapidly afterward. His family fought the government for decades and eventually received compensation. His case became the symbol of MK Ultra's darkest ethical failures. Declassified British footage from the Porton-Down LSD trials shows a chilling moment. A soldier, high on LSD, simply put down his weapon and walked off the exercise field, right into the woods. He didn't flee. He wasn't disobeying orders. He was following a hallucination, convinced something in the trees was calling to him. In a real war, he would have been shot instantly. That's when military planners realized LSD didn't create super soldiers, it created liabilities. In later testimony, some soldiers described lingering after effects. Sudden panic, flashbacks, difficulty distinguishing dreams from reality. Emotional instability. Not everyone suffered long-term harm, but those who did often received little support. Records were classified, making medical care nearly impossible. Some were told, "We cannot confirm what substance you were given." And that uncertainty became its own kind of trauma. By the early 1970s, multiple forces came together to end military psychedelic research. 1. Public exposure. Investigative journalists uncovered MK Ultra. Congress demanded answers. Horrifying details came to light. 2. Ethical backlash. Non-consensual drugging was now seen as a major human rights violation. 3. Scientific failure. LSD was simply too unpredictable. Too slow to onset, too long-lasting, too variable across individuals, too mentally destabilizing. It could not be controlled, it could not be weaponized reliably, it could not be used to interrogate effectively, it could not enhance combat performance. 4. Internal panic. Some intelligence officials feared political disaster. Many MK Ultra documents were ordered destroyed in 1973. To this day, only fragments survived, and with that, the psychedelic warfare dream died. Or at least, it retreated back underground. Now let's break down the myths. Everything below is based on real scientific and historical evidence. Myth 1. LSD can be used for mind control. False. LSD disrupts thought patterns, but does not make people obedient or programmable. Myth 2. LSD creates super soldiers. False. It destroys coordination, attention, and judgment. Myth 3. LSD forces people to tell the truth. False. People become emotional, confused, or withdrawn. Myth 4. LSD improves cognitive performance. False. In military context, it hinders almost every task required in warfare. Myth 5. LSD can allow psychic abilities not supported by any scientific evidence. And reality. What LSD can do: cause hallucinations, alter sensory perception, induce emotional swings, create confusion and panic, trigger psychological distress in vulnerable individuals, temporarily impair memory and coordination. This is why militaries ultimately rejected it. Not because it wasn't powerful, but because it was too powerful and completely uncontrollable. So no, the military didn't end up with telepathic soldiers or psychic warriors. They mostly ended up with a bunch of confused recruits who couldn't even hold onto their rifles. Which means, if a future war breaks out and you see an entire army wandering around, debating philosophy, staring at their hands, and laughing uncontrollably, then yes, someone probably brought LSD to the battlefield again. But until that happens, stick with us at Dark Truth Show, where the stories are terrifying. But at least we won't secretly dose you before telling them. If you want more episodes like this, let us know. And remember, some experiments push science forward, others push people off the edge. See you in the next one.